Okay, this is a little video I'm taking, and I'm using the Restore-Rite StrongBond wood sealer here system, and I put 50% of each A and B in this tub here, and I'm stirring it up. And last time I was here, I dug out what looked like superficial cracks. I knew they would open up a bit, but boy, did they open up, and all this was wet down in here. And I went home for the weekend and let this all dry, and I really back cut those and created a jagged edge interface. So even though there's a lot of ruggedness to that, that's what I want, and up these cracks, these checking cracks. And now I come back with my wood hardener. It's really hot out here today, so I'm going to do this kind of quickly so it doesn't start firming up on me. Put the drop cloth underneath here so anything that drips through. All this happened because when they put these doors on, they didn't prime the bottom of the door. And now I just come in here and I just swab it, and I keep swabbing it and swabbing it and swabbing it, and in all the cracks just like this. I start at the top and let it drool down to the bottom, and then I do some on the bottom, and I just do it like this. See, it's not rocket science, and we just go back and forth, working it in all the cracks. And this Restore-Rite, I love it because it's got 0 VOCs or very low VOCs, probably, I think it's 0 now. And it doesn't stink like some epoxy. So even though this is up against a really nice, beautiful house in here, it's not gonna stink up the house. And this is the most important part of an epoxy job, is getting this really worked in here. If you just do a little superficial swab, you don't get enough of the wood hardened up, and then the hard epoxy just pulls off with the first little movement. So we want to stop all the movement. And so I'm going to continue on down the road and get this all swabbed up and show you what my next step is. All right, I beat the sun. Here comes the sun. The sun's okay, but it can kind of make this stuff a little softer, and I want it to be really dense. You can see I've got my big gouges out. I gouged those out with a hook scraper. I didn't use one of these carbide scrapers. Those are really good, but just one of the old-fashioned ones that are really cheap that you sharpen up really good, because it can really get back there and carve and back cut these areas in ways that this can't. And then I hardened it with the Restore-Rite wood hardener. And now we're going to use the StrongBond epoxy wood putty, just in the deep spot, not in these little cracks. I'm going to use their filler for that, which is a more spreadable epoxy. And so here I have it all mixed up. It's super dense and it's pretty dang sticky. Don't worry about it, because this isn't meant to be spread. This is meant to be shoved. If you need a little bit of non-sticky action, you can just wet your hands with a little bit of water, and then you can still just utilize this, and you won't have any problem, believe it or not. You can also use it to feather the surface right after you put it in, meaning less sanding, because this stuff doesn't sand super well. It's just meant for these big honking holes. So see, I've got this big piece here. I'm just gonna push it all down into all those recesses and into that area that was rotten. And I'm doing this with one hand as I'm trying to film. Believe you, it's gonna look a lot better when I get done, but I'm gonna leave it just a tiny bit proud of the surface. So then when I come back with my heavy sandpaper, I can sand it down to this level, and then I'll feather over everything with the Restore-Rite filler. So this is working really good. I'm going to continue up there and down this side, let that harden all up, and show you the next step. The reason why this is so important in the corners is because this has a very high compressive strength. So when this door opens and shuts, there's flex in these corners, and if it's not strong, if it's a soft material, it'll end up cracking. The most important thing is the wood hardener. Really swab it on. Get it really filled up to where it almost won't take any more, and that's when you know that the wood's going to be hard enough to really grab onto this hard filler. So that's my process so far. I'll show you the next step when I get there. Okay, we're back to these doors. We're fixing up. Here are these joints between the rails and the stiles of the door. This had soaked up water over the years because I didn't prime the bottom, and all this rotted out. I dug that out. I stabilized it with the Restore-Rite wood hardener, and I packed the joints full of the putty that Restore-Rite makes, and it's super dense and super strong, so the flexing of the door won't crack those out, especially because I really almost overuse the hardener. That's the trick to making this stuff last. I haven't filled the cracks here because I'm going to use the Restore-Rite filler, which is a lighter material and skims on with a blade. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hog down the material with this really heavy duty grinder right here, and finish then the edges with the detail sander, and then run over these cracks a little bit to knock down just the high little nibs that will deflect my blade and cause me to have to do more sanding and more filling over the course of the job. And so I'm going to start with this heavy grinder here. Just like that. And I'll vacuum this all up with my vacuum cleaner. I found that sometimes those sanders with the vacuum cleaner attached work if you can keep it flat on a surface, but on these areas where you have to move it all around, it escapes out the sides anyway. So what you've seen here now is that the white part is the part that were the high areas, and they've ground down. The low areas are tan, and I can grind a little bit more off here, and then I'll flow over everything, fill in those divots and these cracks with the filler. And I want to show you something I did that's kind of something I've learned through hard luck. I put a piece of wax paper in between the glass and where this epoxy comes, so the epoxy doesn't stick to the glass. Because it's a really sunny deck, there's a lot of expansion and contraction, and if the epoxy is connected to the glass, then the glass can get a break in it. And so just by putting that piece of wax paper between it keeps the epoxy from going up against the glass, and you shouldn't have any problems. And yeah, so I'll just continue detailing this and using my detail sander to get the edges, and then I'll come back with their filler, and I'll show you how easy it is to use. Okay, ready for the next step. I've hogged down the high spots, and now I've got the Restore-Rite filler. You can either get this in a tub or get it in a tube that's got a little spiral mixer. I work out of a tub most often because I use these. And so you use 50-50 and you mix it up till the dark and the white turn a medium gray color. And now I go over to the project and I just fill in all the low areas. I can even go to this weather stripping and put a little in the weather stripping, because what's been happening is that the bottom of the door is soaking up water. And this job, if it was a primo job, I'd pull the door off, pull off the weather stripping, seal the bottom, etc. But in this case, it's going up for sale. I'm doing so much overkill on these doors anyway, and so I'm going to keep the water from going down in there, because what that has is a ledge on the bottom that holds the water. So as long as the water doesn't get down there, I think it's pretty safe. And then also all the areas that was really soaking up the water has been impregnated with epoxy. So this is going to be a nice long fix, and I'm going to gather this material up on the blade, and it just goes on nice and silky, fills in all the low spots. And I'm not going to try to do it in one coat. I'll do it in 2 coats. So that 2 coats means less sanding, and this blade has a little bit of a bump on it, so it's leaving more lines than I want. So I'll go get another blade. But you see how easy that is, and I can feather it up like that. And so if you try to do it in one coat, which you sometimes can, you end up doing a lot more sanding. And since I'm already going to be on this job for a while, I can do some patches and then come back and give it a little scuff sand, and then give it another tight pull, and I'll end up using less epoxy and also less sanding. And then I can also work it into all these cracks here and fill them, and then they'll go away. So a lot this epoxy does that I love, love, love. And so I'll just continue on and fill in the rest, and then it's a scuff sand, and then the next coat is even thinner than this coat. So that's the process, and when it's all painted up, this stuff paints up really good. You just give it a light scuff sand with some random orbital sander, and then right onto it with house paint. You don't even have to prime this stuff. All right, that's my project. Okay, here we are back at these doors, and I've been fixing these up with the Restore-Rite epoxy. First the wood hardener, and then the big joints that I hogged out with my knives, the rotten wood with the putty. And now I'm using the filler in all the soft areas I'm floating in, as well as the cracks that were up and down the side. And here's the thing, as I've scuffed it all up, you can tell that because of the white scuffy marks on it, just knocking down the high ridges and giving the paint something to bond to. And the trick is, you don't even need primer for this. I'm going right to house paint. This is a satin house paint, and I can just go on here and paint it up just like that. Nothing hard or different about it, just normal painting. So that's the thing with my epoxy method, is at the end of the day, it paints up beautifully, just like a standard house paint job. And a lot of people might say, well, why go through all that process with epoxy? Why not just use Bondo? Everyone else uses Bondo. Bondo has a big problem. There's a lot of different little problems, but the big problem is it's such a hot product, meaning that when it cures hot. And what that is expansion. So say I put it in this joint here, it goes in, and as it heats up, it dries. And then what happens after it heats up? It has to shrink because it contracts when it dries. And that creates the initial problem area where water is going to get in. So don't let anybody tell you that you could have done this easier with Bondo. Well, maybe easier. I wouldn't even say that. But the trick is that the epoxy, although heat can build up if you mix up too much of it at once, not so much with Restore-Rite because it's a zero VOC, no solvent epoxy, but epoxy in general doesn't get hot like the Bondos do and the body fillers that a lot of people are using. So I'll paint this all up and I'll show you my project when I'm done. All right, here we are at the doors that I've restored using the epoxy. I used a Restore-Rite StrongBond epoxies here, and spent about one day, we'll call it $800 in labor and maybe $200 in epoxy and paint. And this is a triumph because everyone else thought these doors had to be restored. Remember the earlier videos where it was all tortured back here and the joints were all broken up and all the major checking of the wood going up, all been restored with the Restore-Rite. So we'll call it $1,000 or $1,200 to restore. And my great friend Jesus from Net Zero Builders told me to replace them. Low end, $7,000, high end, $12,000, $13,000, replace these doors. So we're saving a lot of money, and they'll be good for years to come. And they can sell this house with a good conscience that they're giving their buyer a good product and not something that's going to fall apart. Hey, David Zurun of Dave Zurun Painting here, back in my humble abode. I've just sent in to Alan a video series on some French doors I restored, and you'll get to watch that. And I just want to say that the Restore-Rite epoxy line is fantastic. It allows me to do things that nobody else seems to think can be done. The doors in the video series, everybody else said had to be replaced. They couldn't possibly be fixed. And I was able to tell them, yes, we fix those all the time. And it'll cost you $1 for every $5 or $7 you'd spend if you replace the doors. You can keep the doors. You don't have to throw them in the landfill. You don't have to cut down more trees. You don't have to ship them across the state in trucks and all the things that happen when you replace things. And so it's a very green process, but it's also a process that really works and will save you time and money on your projects or on the projects you do for your clients. And I love the Restore-Rite because he's got the 3 basic things that you need with epoxy. You need a wood hardener, you need a wood filler that is a big bulky fill, and you need some spreadable epoxies to smooth out the deal. And with those 3 things, you can achieve just about everything. All right, well, enjoy the videos and enjoy using the Restore-Rite epoxy.